WCLN 1170 Radio and Star Vision Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The name of the show is We Should Know. I want to thank Nicole for her introduction each and every week. She always does a great job for us with that. Also, I want to thank folks that give us some feedback. I'm constantly getting feedback on shows we've had. And of course, the recent show we had with Miss North Carolina, a lot of you called or you sent an email or saw me on the street and thought that Jonna did a great job, and you found out a lot about the whole Miss North Carolina pageant you hadn't given consideration for, and of course Jonna Edmonds was here. And previous to that, we had numerous calls and contacts and comments about Dr. Wes Jones and Cape Fear digestive diseases and what he does there, and his book, of course, that we highlighted in that show. So I want to thank you for that. Today we got an equally, I guess, welcome guest, and really not a guest, it's kind of like family. Kelly McCullen is with us. Kelly is with UNC TV. Kelly, you've been around for a while. I always have to say this. So you started out with WRRZ with your career, and I guess we won't say broadcasting, but you started out there talking to folks on the airways many years ago.
You love these biographies.
I love it.
I'm going to condense this thing down
I
for you.
love it.
WRRZ 880 country music.
There
WRRZ 20 years ago.
Dave didn't.
Pat's left over at WCLN. I went over there for a summer, and then I went to college, and the rest is history. Worked behind the scenes, was the newsman up in Greenville, Mississippi for 5.5 years. The job opening came at UNC TV again, where I'd spent some time in college, and I came back as a reporter. And now I'm covering state politics, and there's not many of us left in Raleigh covering state politics.
It's probably one of the most, I guess, lively fields you can be in, it would seem to me, in broadcasting. My question, though, in looking at that progression, when you first caught that, let's call it the bug of broadcasting, did you envision, did you plan to be where you are now? Was it just one of those things, the door opened up and there you were and you took advantage of it?
Well, you have to sometimes crack the door open and ask, is it open, and can I come in? And that really helps a lot. And you do have to be forward with yourself and promote yourself at a certain point. If you're passive trying to break into the communications field, and there's been a lot of Clinton High School graduates and Sampson County graduates who've gone into communication, it's tough. You got to be willing to leave home, and you got to be willing to say, yes, I can do that. And if you're weak at any point, there's somebody else out there wanting to be on TV, wanting to be, quote, famous, and they'll knock you right out of that job if you're not careful. So it's a tough nut to crack, but once you're in, it's a joy.
Kelly, you hit something that I know I've had conversation about. Is that whole idea of colloquialism and staying in your area. The idea that you have to be willing to move. Now, of course, you've gone to Greenville, South Carolina, and other places.
Mississippi. I went even further south than
Mississippi. So when you look at that, how important is saying that? If somebody's listening to us right now, maybe they're in their early 20s, maybe they're graduating from high school, maybe they just got out of college. How important is this for them to understand when they're looking at a job or they're tracking a career they want to be? They've got to commit to moving out of that area, their comfort zone.
Maybe they have to commit. I'm just speaking for the field I got into. A lot of times students will leave high school and go to college, and in college, they get so focused on their book work, they don't get any real-world experience. You know, if you go to state, some people grab coffee for the overnight anchors at WRAL. They work for UNC TV or WTVD or there's some opportunity there. You got to be bold and you got to go after it and get it. It's that little mix of real-world experience that shows you will get up and work the grunt shift and your degree and in your training that equals something that's hireable in the outside world. It's just the nature of North Carolina, this being we're a little bit larger in TV market, that if you want to be a reporter or on-air talent, you have to find a local news station willing to hire someone for just above minimum wage, which would be Glendive, Montana, places in Nebraska, maybe New York if you don't have a thick accent, and Georgia, South Carolina, just tiny markets, and they're all over America. There's just not many of them here. Wilmington's a small market, but it's a nice market that pays well, and so you get good quality talent, in my opinion, in Wilmington, despite it being a, quote, small town market-wise.
Well, and I think it's a good point in the discussion here, because now when we talk about this, I'm also thinking about where the media effort is going now. I mean, prior to this going on the air, you were talking with some of the guys here that's in some of the technical language. I had no clue what you were talking about. Well, when we start looking at that, where are we headed now when we look at news or breaking news? And as the job you're in now as a producer and a director and all these kinds of things you do at UNCTV, is there something now, another market that we're missing? Is there something emerging that we're not aware of?
It's common sense is a lot more things are going to the internet. So I can watch a little video on my cell phone or on my laptop. People aren't watching the national news at 6:30 like they used to anymore. That's changing, but they still have millions of viewers. So the audience is, by virtue of just so much technology and channels and radio and all, it's splintering, as they say. And so we're slicing the same pie smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's still shaking out. So, 10 years ago, you weren't here to talk about issues in Sampson County. It was a newspaper-only world. 20 years ago, Andy Stewart had his talk radio show there for a couple of years. So, what goes around comes around in a lot of ways, but it's a little bit higher tech.
When we think about that, and you mentioned in Sampson County, eastern North Carolina, east of 95, there's a lot of rural areas in North Carolina. One of the big things that we looked at many years ago with the internet when it sprang forward was trying to get access to folks in rural areas. Now we have such things as telemetry. We've got the capability of sending messages without having the ground cable there. But as Lyman Horn will tell you very quickly, you got to have cable in the ground somewhere to send that wireless message. So where do you see rural areas? How does that come together, and what can technology? What may be an emerging market that we're not looking at in rural areas?
I would say probably medicine. Telemedicine is going to open up some doors, and they're trying that down in Robeson County and other places that are challenged. East Carolina, I believe, is going down there with some dental clinics, sending their students down.
They are.
You're probably tracking this a little better than I am.
They are.
But to think you could go to a high-class facility in Sampson County, or even in Clinton, or maybe a smaller town, Roseboro, Salemburg, and be seen legitimately by a doctor at UNC Chapel Hill or Duke or Johns Hopkins or anywhere because of this internet connectivity, pretty miraculous if it ever gets off the ground. I don't know that that's in the works, but I can certainly see a future there. And that's the biggest thing I see.
I think you're exactly right. One of the things is just recently in a discussion, Secretary Voss, the DHHS Secretary, talked about telepsychiatry and how important that was, and the way it worked and the dynamic of it because of the capability of the visual medium. You could see, a psychiatrist could talk to a patient and actually see pupils, see the reflection, see dilation, see the kinds of things they need to see what's going on with that person as they talk about the intricacies of behavioral science to a patient. So you got to have pretty good stuff to be able to make that happen.
Well, we'll see. It's all money. It's some of it's tax dollars, some of it's private investment, a lot of it's community involvement. And if it's a lot of times, if there's a will, there's going to be a way. And every community is different for what it needs, and niches will be filled.
UNCTV, been around a long time. A lot of folks really look at UNCTV sometimes if there's a special kind of program on.
Right.
You have folks sometimes that'll track something. Say if you're doing an interview with, Phil Berger, or you're doing an interview with Tom Tillis or somebody, they may want to hear what you're saying. How do you determine what the need may be or what kind of population that you're targeting? Do you have any kind of studies that you do, or you just take a shot at it kind of like we do here and you toss it out there and see who hunts?
Yeah, when you have a beat, and during the season I'm at the legislature and I'm there off session this session, you see what's happening down there and you react to the events on the ground. So big bills, big issues, you see who the movers and shakers are, and it might be Speaker Tom Tillis, who's now running for Senate, might be Senator Phil Berger, who's probably the most powerful politician in this state, and you go for the highest you can get that's bookable and get them on to discuss the issues that you think ordinary people want to know about. And statistically, the only statistic I know, and I got this from other reporters, about 13% of our state population is fully engaged in state politics. You think you're watching politics with Fox, MSNBC, and CNN, you're getting Congress, all that battle.
Oh, yeah.
It's a different world down in Raleigh. Some of the same elements, but they get more done in Raleigh, and they have to balance a budget, and they have to get out of town by July 1st.
Well, one of the things, Kelly, that was obvious and apparent this year is that Raleigh and down at the legislature, and you spend some time there because you guys got a room there at the legislature. I hadn't been in it, but I understand it's like a studio set up there at the legislature.
And you come down there, you
I
never
need to
drop
check that
by
out.
and visit, never have lunch,
I need
never
to check that out. I've had an invitation.
It really hurt.
I've had an invitation. The interesting thing is, all of a sudden this year, we got national attention at the legislature
Over
with
what?
some of the things that was going on. I mean, the Moral Monday movement pulled national attention. And, you know, I look back and I reflected that, and I'm thinking, okay, what was that all about? One of the things, of course, was voter ID. The other thing it was about was folks said it was about teachers not getting enough money, not getting paid. What did you sense and what did you see sitting in the middle of that as these things were happening? And of course, we get a little bit of the buzz from different media, but it's not a true picture because we're not there.
You tell me. What was the picture down here about Moral Monday?
Well, you know,
I wasn't here.
Here's the thing I think we're getting in this area, that there was tens of thousands of people
There was
marching
1,000
on the
or
legislature.
2,000 people there, and they showed up every Monday afternoon.
Exactly. How does a person that listens to a TV show, maybe out of Raleigh, which, I mean, you could call David Crabtree or whomever, but there's typical sound bites we get.
Sure.
How would a person, or even can they may not be able to do it, how do they determine exactly what the impact is, and who do we listen to validate that and say, well, it's not 10,000, it's 1,000, maybe 500? Is there some way we can
sample different products? People are fiercely loyal to their brands, whether it's tied detergent or whether it's one of the local 6 o'clock newscasts, and there are differing varieties of quality with Raleigh newscasting. Well, I'm not in that run and gun 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock game. I do see it a lot, and I'm around those people. They all mean very, very well, but there's different levels of commitment, no doubt about it, like anything else. You have to sample the product and see, and I'm going to tell you, the online thing, with these blogs and with these news reporting on the internet, read several articles and don't stick to one brand, because maybe you've got a reporter who has a bone to pick with a certain party or another, and they're going to tell you one side. There's somebody else out there telling you the other side, and if you can take the two together, you can come to your own conclusions in a fairly intelligent way. It just depends on how you choose to take in the media, and it's a lot. People are disgusted with politics, and I think it's because there's so much of it, whereas back in the 70s, they weren't the good old days. There was no way to tell you what was really going on.
That's very true. That's very true. And the advantage was there were certain people there that would take advantage of that and tell you what you needed to know and kind of cut down from there. We're going to take our first break. We're going to go to break. We're talking with Kelly McCullen with UNC TV. We'll be back in a moment. The name of the show is We Should Know. Call a friend. Have somebody tune in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to give a shout out to all those folks at WCLN Radio. It mentions us on their radio show, Robert Stroud, Boogie Shoes Radio, on Saturday afternoon. Robert's always kind enough to mention us. Don Smith, believe it or not, one of the guys that's been in the radio business for over 50 years, does something called The Country Store. If you hadn't heard it, tune in, 1 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday, and it's amazing what Don has. Don, we thank you for all you do. Wayne Weeks, Southern Gospel Hour, have to give them a shout out for everything you do. Mention our name for the contacts and folks that listen to your show, listens to this show, or watches us as well. We come to you on WCLN Radio, simulcast on Star Vision TV and Star TV Channel 16. Tuesday, and there's also a replay on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. We're talking with Kelly McCullen today.
All of that without a cue card.
All of that without a cue card, Kelly. It's amazing.
Very good, JW.
It's
You're a real
amazing.
professional.
I'm just rolling it. Kelly, it's always good to have you here because, you know, when you come and you walk away, you probably don't realize this, but I pick up more information and more little cues and ideas because you've been doing this for quite a while, and you've been in a market in the Triangle that's one of the largest growing markets up there, and it's huge market, and the dynamic is changing. And from what I can see and listen to folks, and I've talked to, quite frankly, I talk to folks periodically up there. Donnie Harrison, a good friend of a lot of people in Wake County. Sheriff Harrison tells me there's a lot of folks moving in from different states up there. His population is certainly growing.
Oh, absolutely.
But here's the question: as we see that happening, how is it changing, in your opinion, the way things are done in Wake County and the Triangle? Is it changed the good old kind of slow speed mentality sometimes that we look at as country folks? Is that going out the window, or are we still holding our own?
Raleigh's a big town. You have Cary, of Apex, and just living up there is a lot of transplants. People want to live in those suburbs, and they want to live in Raleigh, and they're coming, and Raleigh's going to boom in the next 10 years, provided the economy holds somewhat stable and doesn't lock us in, make us feel bad about doing anything with our lives. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people coming in, and the dynamics are changing to some degree. But if you go out a certain radius in Wake County, there's country country folks there. I've gone to Garner, to the McDonald's, and there's the good old boy sitting in there. Now, you don't see very many good old boys in Cary. They're good old boys, but they're from Buffalo.
Whole different accent.
Exactly. I'm rare in Cary. I live there, and I'm one of the few. I went and got my hair cut the other day. Well, you're the second native North Carolinian I've seen today. I'm like, wow, okay. That's the reality of it.
That's the dynamic.
Yeah.
How does that affect TV or communications or broadcast?
No,
you still broadcast the same way?
Yeah, we broadcast the same way. We look for the same stories. In fact, it makes it even more critical that we get to the rural areas if we can, and we cover stories that are not so easy to reach. Raleigh is so big now. You do 30 minutes of news a night, most channels, and never really leave town. Put a guy or a woman out in Fayetteville to catch that out there at Fort Bragg, and maybe Wilson, I think, may have a reporter or two out there, and you just soak it in from Raleigh. And as that town grows, there's going to be enough car wrecks and mayhem and city council fights and you name it to pretty much snuff out news coverage in Harnett and Sampson and Johnston County if folks aren't careful.
As a reporter, as somebody that not only reports but directs, puts shows together, understand the background, what really intrigues you the most? What causes you to go, wow, I really want to do this?
Putting something together.
From ground up?
From the ground, like coming up with an idea and wondering if anybody even cares to watch it. Not mass media, not in the bulk, but will it be appreciated by a core audience who will sincerely appreciate something that I've done? That's it. It's a very difficult challenge, and you strike out half the time. You'll do something, I'll do a story. I think it's great, won't hear a word about it. And I'll say, well, that one didn't work. Yeah. And then other things will blow up. So, I did a story on moonshine, and it got a few hundred hits on YouTube, and the ratings are always kind of, wishy-washy, and they're here and there, and they're gone. But I look at YouTube, and but yet the interview I did with the moonshiner, I put that, the raw interview, 12,000 views. Go figure. My heart and soul goes into story. It didn't get much. The interview with Cookie Wood out in the mountains talking about moonshining, off the charts. Like, very good. Now YouTube gets millions of hits, so I'm in my own little world.
Well, it's interesting when you think about those things, though, because there is a market, I think, for the specialty kind of piece that you put together. But again, how and is there a way? Is there any rhyme or reason to putting that together that you know that you're going to be getting 12 or 15,000 or 30,000?
Do you know? Do you know when you pick up the
not.
phone and call
Absolutely.
somebody? Same difference.
Absolutely.
TV is TV in a lot of ways. The toys get bigger, the teams get larger, it gets more efficient. It may look a little better because they can afford better cameras. But whether you ride a $10 bicycle or a $10,000 bicycle, everybody pedals and sits on an uncomfortable seat. And that's the gist of it.
Very good point. Very good point. We'll switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the things that's happened in Raleigh. And just a feel, an observation from your point. One of the things that we really have looked at and looked at what North Carolina's doing. We've got a new governor. We obviously have a whole new legislature. The dynamic, the pendulum has shifted, should we say, to some degree, and that shift has been not only observable, but it's been dynamic. What's one of the biggest things that you think this shift in the 180 degree, as you said, what is one of the biggest things that you've seen sitting inside that legislature, and you get to talk to folks not only on the air, but I suspect there's folks that come by and sit down and just say, hey, Kelly, what's up?
It's no different than what I saw last decade when Democrats ran the House, the Senate, and the governorship. It's the Republicans running, and they're running a Republican agenda. I will let you go to your Rotary clubs around here and argue whether it's conservative, ultra-conservative, moderate, or liberal. Everybody's all over the board with what they're doing. But there's no question there is a Republican agenda, and they are implementing it in large amounts. So it's not an incremental thing. They went for wholesale changes this session. Right out of the gate, you go for unemployment reform. You've got they attempted tax reform, school reforms, and that's probably near and dear to your heart, and on and on and on. We have to almost start breaking down the issues to start talking about them one by one, and you get in the weeds with political talk. So a show like this, we can talk about the issues, pick 2 or 3, we can go an hour, we can go 15 minutes, go 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Well, and one of those biggest issues, I think that a lot of folks got a lot of mileage out of, especially in the media area, obviously because you saw it everywhere, was this whole issue about gun control. We had a couple of guys that come down, and a couple of folks talk about gun control. I pulled a guy out from UNC, from the School of Law up there, Institute of Government, and he talked about the legality as it related to gun control, what that meant, what was or was not legal, all these kinds of things. But ultimately, we've got a pretty open state now when it comes to access of guns, and one of the big tipping point issues for a lot of people was that idea that you, if you had the permit, could carry your sidearm, if you will, it sounds like a Western, into the local bar or the local restaurant where alcohol is served.
Right.
And so that's there. We know that's there. Is that kind of meddled out and folks just kind of accepted that now? Or do you still hear discussion about?
It's law, and there's going to be no way to repeal it. I don't see under any circumstances how they repeal it unless something happens and the emotional winds change in North Carolina. Yeah, you can bring your concealed weapon into a bar or restaurant that serves alcohol. I think the owners have the right to put a no firearms sign up, and that should be binding. So they do leave property rights alone at this point, so that you can ban it if you own the business and say no guns. And the the pro Second Amendment forces now, the advocacy groups are now starting some kind of business card campaign where if the business doesn't want concealed weapons in, they can go and say, well, we're not going to patronize your business because we think that's wrong. You're putting your customers in danger by not allowing legal permitted concealed carry in the premises, because the criminal's going to be there with his weapon. That's the logic behind it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And now I think we're seeing some of the same kind of movements on campus too, on college campuses. I mean, although you've got to supposedly keep it locked in the trunk of your vehicle, I think you can have it there. If it's
I think that's
trunk.
right as well. That bill was not as easy to understand. There's a lot of moving parts. So towards the end of the legislative session, a lot of small bills were rolled into one giant omnibus bill with a lot of different regulations that the bills themselves you might have thought were dead or wasn't getting any traction. They were just being rolled into one bill. So there's a lot more. That one gun bill was the firearms were one thing. They've changed reporting requirements, mental health requirements. There's a few other things in there didn't get as much attention, but you're on it. I mean, I think it's county by county whether they think that's a good idea or not.
I agree. And you get that conversation with the local guys at the store, the local coffee shop, or whatever. You hear all that conversation. The other thing I think is interesting too is that we got again national attention by our Attorney General Eric Holder with the voter ID law. I mean, North Carolina. Being targeted, I mean, no surprise. I mean, there was no surprise that he would do that simply because of the dynamic of the politics. But it does bring this sense of a focus, I guess, on a national level of North Carolina. Now, whether that's good, bad, or otherwise, I don't know. Have you got any sense of that at all? I mean, voter ID
every state that's done voter ID is in the national eye. For a while, it goes through the court system, and either the law is rejected judicially or it's accepted, and my understanding is North Carolina has mirrored Georgia, which has withstood judicial review, and what you're into now is political debate about the effect of voter ID. Could it hurt mainly seniors, minority voters, people who might tend to vote Democratic? That's been the rub, was this. But that voter ID bill did a lot more than just require voter ID in a few years. It's shortened the amount of early voting. It's done a few other, in same-day registration, doesn't allow high school students to what's called pre-register at 16. Some of these policies were newly enacted by Democrats last decade, and Republicans took charge and said, you did this to get Democratic advantages. We're going to roll it back to the more traditional law, or roll back, as they say, progress. And we're going to set things back the way they were before you did this late last decade. And so now Democrats who are running are seeing that this is an attack on our base.
Yeah,
Republicans,
it really is.
And Republicans are saying, well, you're using these loopholes to illegally vote this, that, and the other, and that's the traditional gray area of politics. Depending on where your persuasion is, this is a great bill, it's a bad bill. The polls suggest the public wants a clean voter ID. Now, all the other tangible little nuances in that bill probably haven't been polled as much, but voter ID is a popular idea if it's just voter ID.
One of the things that I found was interesting, of course, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to Governor McCoury prior to him being Governor McCoury. At this studio and get a little sense of a feel for what kind of guy he was. And the words conservative and liberal, somewhere I found him somewhere moving toward the center of that. And when we come back from this break, I want to kind of talk about that a little bit and what those words mean and have the definitions changed. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Kelly McCullen, UNC TV. Fortunate to have Kelly with us today, and again, thank him for his time coming down. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you happen to be driving down the road, listen to us on the radio. You're listening to a show called We Should Know. It begs the question, what should we know, and should we know more or less, or maybe we just don't care about certain subjects. But today we're touching on a number of those with somebody that's in the middle of the heat in the triangle in Raleigh, inside the legislature. When the legislature is in session, he's there. Kelly McCullen. I always like to just tell folks, Kelly, you're just kind of a guy that was born and raised in Sampson County. You're a good country boy with solid base of understanding what people are.
I live a mile outside of Clinton. I don't know if I'm a country boy.
This is
I'm blessed. I'm really
blessed. Really are, and you live in Triangle now, and there's a lot going on up there. And as we went to break a while ago, we were talking about some of the issues and some of the dynamics. And of course, you know, we use the words conservative, liberal, those kinds of things. And I mentioned it when at the time the candidate McCrory was here talking. Clearly there was a sense that he was steering a little bit away from that extreme right conservative word and maybe more toward a sense of maybe moderate, or if you look at a scale. I'm not really sure if I know what those words mean anymore.
And I have to gauge what you're saying and how you're saying it to try to discern what is extreme. What is extreme right to you, Jada? You know what extreme right is. You tell me. That's the balancing act. I can't go around Raleigh in the legislature and say, that's extreme right-wing view. That's a negative term.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's very conservative.
It's another word.
That's another word, but that's actually acceptable. Yeah. It's very acceptable terms. What is it? What do all those words mean? They mean what you think they mean. It's just that sometimes within the parties and the primaries, you start arguing and haggling over what is conservative enough versus liberal Republicans, and you'll have those battles in the primaries.
Or moderate Republican or moderate Democrat. What does that mean?
Pat McCrory could run as a candidate, as a more of a centrist right, center-right candidate, because there was no one viable on his political right to challenge him in the primary. Therefore, he can run more as a centrist. And of course, during any general campaign, people moderate their views. Whether they're Democrat, you play to the progressive base. Republicans have to play to the right base. And then you come together, and they look different. But is it fundamentally different? I'm not so sure. The school's still open. The roads still get paved. We still have police officers.
Absolutely.
I mean, I tell people the sun still rises if your party loses an election.
Yeah, even with sequestration, we've seen that things still go on.
Things still.
Although we were led to believe we were going to fall off the edge of the earth.
Well, that's good politics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's emotion based. It's to get you fired up, and that's one of the drawbacks of all this for me. I've been around so long now. You sort of see the game for what it is.
Exactly.
It's faux anger. It's activists. And doing a great job and really getting attention. You draw attention to yourself. You sway that public opinion, and teachers have been good at it and are good at it. They just had something last week. They almost walked out. That would have been a big mistake, but they didn't, and they still got their word out there.
I agree with you on the walkout thing. That would have been a huge mistake.
No, that's not my opinion. I understand that's a fireable offense.
Oh, yeah.
So you can do it.
It's definitely fireable.
You can keep it real, but...
And it would have been a huge... For that group that's trying to make a difference or make a change or at least be recognized, not only would have been a mistake as far as the legality is concerned, it would have been a mistake, I think, is the perception.
And I'm assuming, a political mistake's not for me to judge. I'm just saying if the rule says you walk out of the classroom, you're fired, then objectively that would be a mistake for someone who wants to keep a job.
Absolutely.
Unless you want to dare your school board not to do anything about you or state officials. So, people are ringing that bell. Now, whether it makes a difference or not, I don't know. We got one more season, and then political season for the legislature is 2014. Boom. After next August, it's going to be on.
Here's a discussion. I want to have this discussion. I know we've talked about this off the air quite a bit, and it's the whole concept of politics and the political structure. I don't want to get into a civic lesson here or anything, but when I look at the political structure and the concept of politics in our country, I'm one of the first people to step up and go, hey, it's very important. You need to get involved in this because it's part of the democracy we live in. It's part of a democratic system of government. You have at least if debatable, I guess, the perception that you do have some control because of who you vote for or who you do not vote for ultimately may end up in a leadership position and determine what, and so those things give them basics. But when we look at it now and we look at the percentage of voter turnout, and this is not new, this has been going on for some years, and I'm sure you've seen it up there, but the percentage of voter turnout, it's a little bit sad when you see all of these things happening, and you hear folks talk about, oh, this is bad, this is, and less than 25% of the registered voters turn out.
People will get involved in politics, and they'll get involved, and they'll go to the poll when the issues move them to. If they're fairly content, even they may not be wild about the guy, but if they can live, mayor's a good guy, the commissioner's a good guy, whoever, they may not show up because they just take it for granted. He's doing okay, not enough to make me protest for him, but I'm not rabid enough or emotional enough invested in someone to go out and campaign for them. Those are always small areas. And in North Carolina with redistricting, they're pretty safe districts throughout. I think parties can spend most of their money in just a handful of districts, and there are 170 districts, House and Senate. So 2 or 3 will get most of the money because they're actually competitive. So in Sampson County, you can honestly look at the primary. If you want to see a war for Larry Bell's seat, look to the Democratic primary if someone comes up. Republican's not going to beat him. William Brisson, who you've had on this show. As a matter of fact, Democrats, if they could knock him off in the Democratic primary, they do it. Because
he's one of those people I see on that scale of being more toward the center or moderate kind of thing.
They went directly after him, and the Democratic Party went after him to try to beat him in the primary, and he barely held on last time. And if you notice, there was no real Republican running against William Brisson. The Republicans didn't put a lot of effort in because William Brisson has worked with Republicans on the key issues. I mean, they'll give him they'll throw him a bone, but he's told me, he's like, this is the way of the world. These guys run this state. I got to work within their power structure if I want to get anything done for my county. Which then was Cumberland. I think now Sampson's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got to agree with that because I had him on this show with Senator Brent Jackson, and he and Senator Jackson both were very homogeneous in their responses, their communications. I mean, their answers to key questions.
Well, they're big ag. Those guys are big ag, and there's not going to be a farm bill they're not going to like. So let's just keep that up front. These guys are big farmers. So
it's a big issue. I want to hit on another subject during this segment, and we might have to run over to the next segment with it. But we talked about politics in the sense of what it is, and we've talked about these labels we put on it. But there seems to be a huge polarization, more than usual. It just seems to me from just general observation. I really don't have any data to put on this, but a huge, strong polarization of the party structures, at least on the national level, simply because there's not a lot getting done in Washington D.C. They've just kind of pulled back. And the executive branch, and we look at that and you say, well, that's not really big significance to us. But at the same time, when you roll out a now health care bill, as we both know is law, has been passed, it's out there, it's in action, has been in action for the past couple of years. And I've had Wayne Goodwin, the guy that's in charge of insurance for the state. I've had
but he doesn't really weigh in.
He tries to find the middle ground. He kept saying he kept saying there would be no major impact. He was following the brand that the party was putting out, obviously, but then I have attorneys come on and they say, well, no big deal. And then all of a sudden now that the thing is turned upside down, and we see a lot of people skirting around going, well, what just happened?
Yeah, but it's still a law, and it's still got to, until it changes, they've got to implement whatever it is, whether the citizens like it or not. They elected it, and so if they don't like the policy, you elected the lawmakers across this country that made that bill happen, made it become law. So enough said about the health care law.
Yeah, because it's going through. The dynamic is that the ultimate price to be paid is yet to be seen. I think some of these things are tested out over time. So depending on who I've talked to and who I've had on, they'll give me this line or they'll give me to the left or the right or the middle.
Mike McIntyre still represents this area, and he's somebody you need to get on and ask about. He represents you in the House, and you can ask Richard Burr, Kay Hagan. I think especially those three. Him and home with anybody else at the state level is not going to do you any good. Those three cast votes.
Of course, I've had McIntyre on, and I've invited both our senators. I haven't gotten a response, but I've had McIntyre on several times.
They're going to measure where they appear and control their appearances.
So and here's important. The thing. So important. So talk about that.
Thing is, you want to get on a show and an interview, and because they're a senator, you want to throw them deference. And you look at some of the shows on national, and you think they're rude to politicians. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they really are across the line, but there's a difference in being rude to someone in court and asking them to explain themselves. Mm-hmm. Why did you vote for this law? Why did you vote for that law? Mm-hmm. They're elected. They're raising millions of dollars. The least these people can do and is answer your questions that are legitimate questions. It's especially on the local level that you have to do that, because you get some of the most thin-skinned people in these county elected positions and city elected positions. And I can't tell you one over the other. I don't know any of the leaders, but I've been there.
I mean, it's not just one county. They're all big, as you said.
No, and that's where the level of media has to settle in and find its role where it can actually make the most difference for its core audience. Whereas this show, I would say county, regional, and local politics if you want to go that route. Me, I'm at the state level, have no interest in playing the Raleigh News game, nor can I go to Capitol Hill and cover it better than the PBS NewsHour, Fox, CNN, and all the rest of those outlets. So you have to know your role. But I think what happens is sometimes we get too nice or we get too rude based on our public perception of how someone, if someone coming in, because they've got elected, they don't get the hard questions. And that's something that I want to make sure I ask a fair question and get everything on the board without being deferential or without being rude. If you're rude, you don't get them. If you're too deferential, you lose your audience.
I want to just mention that it's so important when you said it, because I remember I was looking at one of your interviews, and I cannot remember the legislator's name, but it was on fracking, and your comment to him when you asked him the question, and I'm trying to remember
Mike
that.
Hager,
and you said when you asked him that question, you said, I can see that makes you shudder a little bit or something when you asked him that question, and it was about the fracking issue and the dynamic of what that was, but I thought it was interesting because you just went straight to it and said, boom, what's the deal with
There's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with hearing someone who doesn't have a public voice ask a question rhetorically. Why is there always raining on me?
Yeah.
Well, that's fair enough to go to the rainmaker and say, they're saying you're always creating rain to rain on them.
Yeah.
Why do they feel that way?
And
that's
if
a fair question for
explain
you.
it. Yeah.
That is exactly right. And there's some local issues going on right here, one big one right now, that some small segment of the population is starting to talk, and we'll see where it goes.
You care mention
Mackenzie Sessoms. The little girl was assaulted and murdered and left on a couch after allegedly a party. I don't know anything other than what I saw on WRL.com and read maybe in the paper here. And there's a group of people out there saying, I'm not hearing anything. Maybe investigative and it's just a quiet period collecting facts. But
why does it matter? Because we should know.
Sheriff, commissioners, JW, why are these people not feeling like they're heard?
We're going to be back in a moment with Kelly McCullen talking about some serious, interesting subjects here with Kelly McCullen. Stay with us. Good point. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Having a wonderful discussion with Kelly McCullen, UNC TV. Took time to come down and talk with us today. I want to give a shout out to all these people from Duplin County and surrounding counties that listen to our show. We actually cover about 8 or 10 counties radio-wise, and several thousand people on the TV and Cablevision side. We want to thank all those folks for giving us comments, feedback. That's what we need to know, and that's the kind of thing we want to put out there. Things you need to know more about. The name of the show is We Should Know. Kelly, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time to come down periodically and talk to us.
You bring up a great point, JW. It's lonesome to sit behind a desk and ask questions and not know if you asked the right question, whether you made yourself look like a fool. And on that last break, I was just saying, trying to bring this Sessoms case, and it's quiet right now. And I don't want to get involved in it.
But it's been on the state media for a couple of 3 times now.
A couple of 3 times in 3 months. And I found it on Facebook. Somebody puts up a Facebook page, and I said, okay, there's a community out there, might be one person, who says, what's going on? I'm not hearing anything. And there was a reason for that. I wrote a nice reply back. I said, my experience is take time, be patient, let this thing play out, and let the DNA and the facts all come together, and you might have you a case by early next year. However, at some point, it's okay to ask of your sheriff and your investigators, police, SBI, what's going on? I know you can't tell me, but are you still working on it, or is the case going cold? We need to know that. And for media like you, or whether it's some reporter somewhere in Clinton or in Sampson County, it's okay to ask, what's going on? They may say no comment. That is a comment. But it's worth asking because you have voices, they have voices that ordinary people don't have. And never be disrespectful as a host, but always ask a fair question. And there's a lot of fair questions out there and a lot of thin-skinned people who won't like you if you do that, JW.
When you look at local small communities like this area versus a larger urban setting like Raleigh, the Triangle, in that area, what's the kind of the differences you see in the immediacy of feedback and the immediacy of impact if you get, I'll just use the word, too aggressive, or maybe you do step, the perception is, and you didn't, maybe you didn't step across the line, but the perception is that you stepped across the line. Do you get any feedback in your area from top down to you, or they don't really,
they don't care? If you're fair, somebody should step should step to your defense. And if nobody will step to your defense, then realize that you're all by yourself doing what you do. And if you ask a fair question and you didn't go off the deep end, stick to your guns as a host, as an interviewer, as anybody else. It's almost you can be too soft, you can be too hard, as we've discussed. Both are equally disrespectful, just disrespectful positions for you to take. But immediacy for a local reporter who sees the same people every day, political types and appointees and things, you have to be professional. You need to be, and that's immediate because they'll call you on the phone. Whereas somebody can come down here from out of town, do a big story, make everybody look bad and feel bad, go back home and never come back down here again for a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's the difference in immediacy. Sometimes your local people do it best. Sometimes your regional people step in and ring a bell so loud it can't be ignored locally.
Well, don't you think oftentimes that folks get in that situation, especially with media, that they just kind of get numbed out? For example, the case you mentioned, it may have hit the airwaves, it may have been in the local paper. Now all of a sudden it's kind of dulled down, and it's not going to be, nobody's going to call any hand as to what is going on with it unless somebody steps up and does it. So whether it's that or whether it's fracking or whatever it may be in the state, somebody's got to step up and say, well, where is it at now?
Don't
What's
be so
happening?
cynical. Let people work. Let people do their job, and let people do the best job they can do on behalf of the public. And your local officials and regional officials deserve that benefit of the doubt every single time. But as a reporter, as someone in the media, don't turn your ears off because other people check out. It's a big event. Whether fracking comes to Sampson County or not, the meetings are certainly boring. It's your job to be at them and stay awake and bring back the tidbits of facts for people. Whether it's that, whether it's mayhem, whatever you want to do, you want to do. You see where I'm coming from with that.
Well, and there's a huge consciousness now, at least out there. I mean, as to whether folks will rise up and make a difference in the political cycle to change people in political office is yet to be seen. But there's a huge concern about taxpayer dollars, taxes, money being spent. What is it being spent on? What is the results of that money being spent? Has there been reductions? But sometimes when you bring folks in and you get I'm not going to use the word aggressive, but if you question some of those things, especially in local politically structured areas, it's easy to make major enemies. Is that the same thing?
Why would you make a major enemy by talking about budget and taxes? And who do you work for? Do you work for the people who watch and care about what you say as a person who's on the air here, or do you work for political people? If you need to get on the state tax dollar yourself and go work as a PR man.
And exactly to the point, then those people that you're supposed to work for, which is all those people out there that you're trying to keep informed, it's always good for me to get those calls and emails saying, yeah, that's what we wanted to hear. Yes, that's where we wanted to go.
On tax dollars, bond referenda, sales tax increases, there should not be a single elected official not willing to come in and answer any question you've got, because if they don't recognize that you're going to make half of your community mad with a tax increase, even though it may be for a good reason, you're out of your mind. You're tone deaf to what you're doing. You run for the office, you eat way too much barbecue and fried fish to win. Be a big boy, be a big girl, and talk about the issues because you're dictating policy. Don't run and hide and blame reporters. Talk to your constituents, keep them informed. If you do that, you don't allow reporters and people like you to come in and hit them hard because the facts would be too well known.
For example, with the legislature, as you sit there oftentimes and you have different folks on, and of course I've seen different people you've had, and you've got access to all these people. I mean, it's a wonderful situation to be in.
It is great.
Have you got that access, do you find yourself, do you have to really remind yourself that your own personal observations to make sure you keep those kind of couched and not step up with your own personal sense? Whether we get it,
it's emotional observations.
Yeah, exactly.
That bill made me mad.
Exactly,
We're all human beings.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody who reports is a human being. If you don't have that much thought process, the idea is to make observations. If the state senator robs the bank, he robs the bank. And if he's indicted, he's indicted. There's nothing wrong with saying that's a fact. Not a good fact, but it's a fact. So you have to watch how you get emotionally involved, and that's where state lawmakers will size up different reporters and determine whether they get access to them for interviews.
That was my next
You're not going
question.
to give me a fair shake.
Absolutely.
If I take communion on Sunday morning, you're going to write a report on how you caught me drinking on Sunday morning.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same kind of thing, and there are people out there who feel they can't get a fair shake. I think it gets a little overboard. Reporters aren't as nefarious as we're made out to be, but it makes for a good narrative, and the folks back home don't like that liberal or that conservative media. And it does make your job a little harder sometimes. Depends on the topic.
How competitive is that, though? When you've got people like Crabtree and others out there, and you're right there in the legislature, is there any going after the same guy you want to sit down, or the same person that represents a certain area? They get to call that shot, or is there something that helps you level the playing field?
Oh no, you just when it comes to access, you just make requests of their staff, and you want to interview the governor, you get put in the line, and they'll size up when you get your interview. And if you want it, you can take it, and you can cancel it if you'd like. So, but do they look? Oh, absolutely. They'll look at Channel 5 wants me on, or CNN, or Fox News wants Pat McCrory on, or UNC TV. There's a hierarchy there. I don't fall at the top, but I'm not at the bottom. But you have to worry about your own production. Like, you can't worry if CBS News got Pat McCrory. You got to hustle to get him on this desk to talk to you as governor. Don't worry about where they're at, because people are going to watch this regardless. They'll watch both interviews.
But either way, you've got skin in the game. Once you get that person to sit down with you, no matter who it is, he's sitting across the table from you, you've got skin in that game then. You're part of that enterprise.
Yes.
Yeah, you're part of that dance. Absolutely.
And you've got to you get so many questions and so much time, and you want to make it happen. And trust me, the viewers will let you know if you come across the wrong way, you come across as incompetent. There's somebody out there who's going to let you hold it.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking as we're talking, I'm hoping our listeners with this show today is enjoying this as much as I am, because I really enjoy sitting down talking to these things. And plus, the message I would want to say to our listeners today is, look, some of the things we talked about, if it's something that resonates with you, let us know.
Yeah,
you can email us, weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. You can see me on the street. You can call. You can send a snail mail to P.O. Box 1482. But it's just important. It's the email usually is what hits.
If you don't do anything else with this show, if you can convince people that when they look at any of the mayors that are in this region, there's probably a dozen of them, that they should not be intimidated, look at that man and say, explain yourself, because that's fair accountability to a vote. If they tell you to get lost, then the elected official has a problem. But most won't, and most might enjoy the challenge to explain their policies, because they might have been misrepresented publicly.
And I've got to say, as far as local folks, and again, I've been fortunate to have some folks sat down, the state level folks, but for local folks have been very congenial and been forthcoming for the most part. Our county manager's been on and has been very forthcoming with issues, and have even encouraged folks to go and look at the budget. One of the biggest issues, again, is back to that dynamic of the percentages, and when you look at the percentages, when it reaches a certain point, it's a very small percentage that even gives
because it's just not. I mean, you only have one media outlet doing, or two, doing local politics, and it's hard to cover it all, and then B, a lot just falls through the cracks. It's hard to get engaged because there's not that robust communication going on back and forth.
Absolutely.
There's no coffee shop banner about what the Clinton City Council did or Roseboro Town Council did. Very rarely. But would it make for a healthier community? Yeah, sure it would. But it's just hard to get that momentum going. You need a centralized person, maybe in media, who can give a voice to the public in a fair way while respecting the people who also answer to the public.
Well, I'm going to use this opportunity again to tell folks, we should know edu@gmail.com.
Yes.
Shoot me an email. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you thought about Kelly McCullen's comments about where we go with this, and look at some of the future dynamics, because we do have, fortunately, we have some folks who will step up, come in, sit down, and they will be frank and direct. Yeah. But folks have got to look a little more in depth.
Well, sure, and you got a Facebook page too.
Absolutely.
So that's, go like that Facebook page, and things you do pop up. You're on YouTube, which is very, very nice, and that's how my family sees you, because we're not in Sampson County. They're sharing your Dr. Wes Jones video right now.
Got a lot of comments from Dr. Jones, and he's just, it's obviously a brilliant guy. A lot of folks that are his patients I've heard from, folks that were looking at going somewhere for treatment, have called me and said, I really like this guy. I like his base, where he's coming from.
So, but see, that's a great public service, JW, and you should be, you've got a nice mix here, and I think you're like me. You always sit and self-reflect. Could I do something better, or ask a better question?
Always trying to improve it.
Yeah, and this is a tough market. You're right. It's a tough market. It's real easy to make people very, very upset, but sometimes you have to do it.
Kelly, thank you for being with us again.
My pleasure.
Today's show, Kelly McCullen, UNC TV. We thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you next week once again on the radio.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question or comment regarding this or any episode, please send your email questions and or comments to jwsimmonsedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday afternoon beginning at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.